me. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I hope you had a great weekend. I did, except coming back on Saturday from New York, where, well, we'll get into that. I suspect it has something to do with a news story about a crazy person trying to hijack a plane. We'll get into it. Right now, though, Joe Biden has gone to Europe. I don't know if you know. Joe Biden is traveling the world, and the press is just gaga over the Biden administration. Although, I got to say, I think it was Allison Camerata on CNN who, having interviewed Jeffrey Toobin, as an aside, we'll get back to Joe Biden in a moment. Jeffrey Toobin is back. Now, for those of you who don't know, which may be 5 of you, Jeffrey Toobin was fired from the New Yorker. He was their legal commentator because he was on a Zoom call and Toobin started tugging his Toobin on the Zoom call with other people watching. He thought his camera was off. Who does that? Just as an aside, who does that? Who self-pleasures themselves on a Zoom call at work? Do you people do that? Is that a deviancy I'm unaware of, that people do that to themselves while they're on work calls? I had no idea this was a thing. Well, it was for him, and the idiot thought that his camera was turned off. And he was fired from the New Yorker and took a hiatus from CNN. Well, he's back. Jeffrey Toobin is back. Allison Camerata interviewed him. Interestingly enough, during the entire interview, they made him keep his hands on the desk. It was striking. No one else does this, but at CNN, Jeffrey Toobin's hands were on the desk the entire time, and the camera made sure that he was framed so that you saw his hands at all time. There was no close shot of Toobin, so no one can accuse him of tugging his Toobin while he was on TV. And the choice of Allison Camerata was intentional, having not just a woman interview Jeffrey Toobin, but a woman who left Fox News complaining about the sexist, misogynist, sexually inappropriate culture at Fox News. They make her interview him, and it was deeply awkward. The entire time, it was deeply awkward. She looked like she wanted to bathe the entire time, not with him. She looked like she was just disgusted the entire time she was interviewing Toobin. Interestingly enough, CNN says that they let him come back because a lot of the anchors wanted to have him on. What does that say about the culture of CNN that a number of the anchors wanted to have Jeffrey Toobin come back on? Now, as an aside here, Toobin is a progressive. Toobin's legal commentary is always of the left. He's not an even-handed legal commentator on CNN, and he never has been. Toobin has always been on the left, a progressive, and they acknowledge that several of the CNN anchors were demanding that he come back. They wanted him to come back on. That's why they brought him back. Who are the anchors who want tugging Toobin to come on TV, to not tug his Toobin? Who are they to give predictable progressive spin, as if he's the only legal commentator available on planet Earth? He's not even that good of a legal commentator. Jeffrey Toobin is highly predictable in everything he says. It's always on the left. He hates the conservatives on the court. He's made no secret of his contempt for people like Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, even John Roberts and Neil Gorsuch. He does not like them. So CNN couldn't find another legal analyst. They had to have the guy who jerked himself off on. I even hate talking about it, but it's true. It's what he did. On camera, on a Zoom call. He got fired by one. CNN waits forever to bring him back. But the other damning thing about CNN's decision is that they fired Rick Santorum for saying that Native American culture really isn't all that woven into American culture. And he's not wrong. He was a statement of fact, but they got rid of Rick Santorum for his comments over Native Americans that were statement of facts, though awkwardly stated. And they brought back on Jeffrey Toobin. I gotta say, there was some funny commentary on, of all places, The View. I am, and look, I'm not ashamed to admit, I'm friends with Ana Navarro. I know a lot of conservatives can't stand her. She desperately hates the president. Most Republicans these days. She is a personal friend. I dearly love her, even as we disagree on a lot of stuff in politics. She's very funny. Well,
okay.
Hang on.
Hello and welcome to The View. Now, Sarah and Megan are out today, and Anna's going to be joining us shortly. But, you know, she's in traffic. Anyway, just 7 months ago, Jeffrey Toobin was fired by the New Yorker magazine and went on leave from CNN for performing a sex act during a Zoom meeting with colleagues that he did not know was still happening. But he returned to the airways on Thursday and was, they asked this question. It's the one that's been on everybody's mind. Take a look.
What the hell were you thinking?
Well, obviously, I wasn't thinking very well or very much, and it was something that was inexplicable to me. I didn't think I was on the call. I didn't think other people could see me.
You thought that you had turned off your camera?
Correct. I thought that I had turned off the Zoom call. Now, that's not a defense. This was deeply moronic and indefensible. I'm trying now to say how sorry I am. Sincerely, in all seriousness. Above all, I am sorry to my wife and to my family, but I'm also sorry to the people on the Zoom call.
So, Anna, you worked for CNN. Are you surprised to see him back on the air?
You know, actually, I'm not surprised he's back on the air, but I will tell you, when I saw that interview, oh, God, how embarrassing, how humiliating. I kept thinking to myself, if I have to go on live TV and explain to the nation why I masturbated on a Zoom call, I think I'd rather go sell avocados under I-95 than get my job back on TV.
Would you rather? That's the game the kids play these days. Would you rather go on CNN and explain why you did that on a Zoom call, or sell avocados under I-95 in Miami? Wow. Tugging and Toobin. Oh, my goodness gracious. They let him back on. They wouldn't let Rick Santorum back on after his awkward, truthful comment about American Indian culture, but they let Jeffrey Toobin come back on television and made the woman who left Fox News for its sexist culture be the one to normalize him. Can you imagine what CNN would do if Fox News did that? Can you imagine what CNN would do? I mean, just take Bill O'Reilly. So I was at a conference this weekend. Bill O'Reilly was one of the speakers. He's now got a show on Newsmax. He's going on tour with President Trump. Can you imagine what CNN would do to Fox News if Fox News let Bill O'Reilly back on television after all the allegations against him? And by the way, this isn't the first deal with Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey Toobin says he wants a new start. He wants to regain people's trust. Let me tell you about Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey Toobin, you know who Jeff Greenfield is? Jeff Greenfield used to be a political analyst on CNN. He now does something, I think, with CBS News. He's a deeply smart political guy. Jeffrey Toobin had an affair with Jeff Greenfield's daughter and got her pregnant and told her he would pay for her abortion and would not pay for child support and would fight her. He ultimately lost, of course, but it was like pulling teeth to get Jeffrey Toobin to acknowledge he was the baby's father. For him to want to apologize to his wife for doing what he did on the Zoom call. I mean, Jeffrey Toobin has a history of this sort of stuff. And CNN keeps covering for him. The New York Magazine finally had enough and said, nope, you're gone. CNN allows this guy to come back. It's a pretty damning indictment on CNN, and this is the news network that is obsessed with Fox News and the goings-on with Fox News, and yet itself has all sorts of problems, including letting this guy back on. Keep that in mind the next time you watch CNN. By the way, there are great people at CNN. I've got a lot of dear friends at CNN. I used to work at CNN. There are news anchors and reporters at CNN who try to do legitimately good jobs, and then the management of the company elevates people like Jeffrey Toobin and overshadows all of the good work those people do. Just shameful, which is why some of them are so frustrated with the network and ready to leave. And now, of course, AT&T is selling the network to the Discovery Channel, so it's only going to get worse. Boy, that was a tangent, wasn't it, from Joe Biden? Yes, Joe has gone to Europe, and they're all congratulatory and puffing up all of them. Here's a little bit of the competition. Fareed Zakaria, there's another one at CNN who's just a delightfully insufferable progressive who says the conventional wisdom of the left. If you want to find out what the left thinks, you just ask Fareed Zakaria.
With Biden's messaging, his demeanor, the other G7 leader excited that the U.S. is back. We're excited to be looking ahead and working together. How much of a reset was this?
This was a huge reset. I mean, to begin with, and I hate to admit this, Biden's press conference was, in comparison to his predecessor, a little boring. His predecessor, Donald Trump's press conferences, particularly after meetings like the G7, were a freak show. They were a circus. You didn't know whether he was about to blow up the alliance. You didn't know whether he was about to announce that the United States was withdrawing, was going to impose new sanctions on its closest allies in the world.
You get the point. They're celebrating the boringness of the press conferences. They're celebrating America is back, baby, because now we're kowtowing to our allies in Europe who can run roughshod over us again. America apparently is back when we give in to the people of Europe who want us to pay for all of their stuff. The media is getting predictable on this, but also the Biden team is getting deeply predictable on this. Some of what they were able to accomplish at the G7 is going to wreck the world's economy, but they're going to do it with the rest of the Western leaders. It's like they're all being played by President Xi of China willingly. We'll get into that when we come back. The President of the United States trying to get buy-in on a global tax from the G7 leaders.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now.
Hello there. Well, this is breaking news happening at this moment. Left-wing heads preparing to explode. Mitch McConnell just said it would be highly unlikely a Supreme Court nominee picked by Biden would be confirmed in 2024 if Republicans take control of the Senate in the midterms. No kidding. They would do the Merrick Garland situation again. I don't think anybody should be surprised by this, but of course it's left-wing meltdown time all over again as they continue to try to pressure Stephen Breyer to retire. I kind of think Breyer will retire. I think he's learned the lesson of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and will retire. The Supreme Court has some really big decisions coming up that are going to cause all sorts of commotion for people. We'll get into Biden. This is breaking news, and I might as well follow along with it. Let me give you a heads up on the number of cases. Keep in mind that they wind down. They should be done by the end of June. They've only got really 2 more weeks to release cases. The biggest one is Fulton versus City of Philadelphia. In Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, it is Catholic Charities of Philadelphia were punished by the City of Philadelphia because they don't adopt into same-sex households or single people, and the City of Philadelphia shut them out of the foster care program. They sued, arguing that they have a freedom of religion. They shouldn't have to give up their deeply held religious beliefs to participate in government programs. This could be a very big deal. There's also the third Obamacare challenge, where because the Republicans got rid of the individual mandate, remember, John Roberts upheld the individual mandate in the Supreme Court and ultimately ruled that Obamacare was a tax because of the individual mandate, that it would fall without the individual mandate. So Republicans gutted the individual mandate, which means that it's no longer a tax. So how does Obamacare survive? A federal judge in Texas versus California, that's the case, a federal judge threw out Obamacare, said it was unconstitutional now because the whole reason it was legal was the individual mandate. If the individual mandate's gone away, the whole thing fails. So now John Roberts will have to, for a third time, try to save Obamacare. The third case is Brnovich versus the DNC. That's the Arizona Attorney General, who President Trump, is a little bit upset with for not fighting harder for him in the election. But Brnovich, who's running for the Senate now, has argued that Arizona's voting rights reforms and voting restrictions were constitutional. He was sued by the Democratic National Committee. This makes it to the Supreme Court. The issue is whether Arizona's procedures run afoul of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, making it illegal to deny a citizen's right to vote on account of race. The Supreme Court has gutted the pre-clearance provision, but there's still another provision. Essentially, Arizona passed a rule. One of the disputed policies requires election officials to throw out entire ballots cast in wrong precincts, even for statewide races where the voters' polling place has no bearing on the outcome of the contest. The second forbids ballot harvesting, a practice that involves third parties collecting early ballots. Arizona threw out both of those. We'll see what the court does. My suspicion is they uphold both of them. There's the NCAA athletic compensation case, NCAA versus Alston. The Supreme Court was pretty nasty to the NCAA. That case is pending. There's also the case of Mahoney Area School District versus BL. This is the case, you'll remember, where the student on a weekend, not on school grounds, posted disease with the caption, F school, F softball, F cheer, F everything, because she was rejected by the varsity cheerleading squad and was punished with a year-long suspension from cheerleading for what she put on Snapchat, off school grounds, on a weekend, on Snapchat. And the school district itself did a terrible job arguing the case in the Supreme Court. I actually talked to some education lawyers who were following this, and they were appalled by the poor argument made by the school. Even the Supreme Court appeared to be trying to help the school out with some of the arguments. My guess is the court's going to rule that the student should not have been suspended, but will still maintain that schools have some level of ability to regulate off-campus speech, particularly when it comes to bullying and things like that, but not just statements in opposition to the school or some such. Those are the big cases, and then we'll find out if Judge Breyer retires at the end of June. The Supreme Court always wraps up by July 1st, and they typically release cases on Monday and Thursday. They released one case today, a unanimous case that the President Trump's First Step Act case did not allow people in prison for crack offenses, crack cocaine offenses, to be able to get out of jail. So there's your Supreme Court. Now, we will now go back to Joe Biden when we come back. While I was thinking about the Mitch McConnell breaking news that he's upping the stakes for the 2022 midterms, I want to make sure that we talk about Joe Biden and what he's done in Europe. He's been meeting with the Queen at Windsor Castle. He has invited her to come to the White House in Washington, D.C. The media reminding people about Donald Trump's faux pas in front of the Queen, ignoring Joe Biden kept his sunglasses on and showed up after the Queen at an event, which is a big protocol no-no. It's a minor issue in the grand scheme of things, though. What happened, though, is him trying to sell us out to a global tax policy. Hi there, it is Erick Erickson. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We've got to get into Joe Biden heading to Europe. The big issue for Biden in Europe is he wants a global minimum tax. That's his big thing. Here's the situation. Some countries on the planet, particularly in the West, do not have high tax rates. In fact, they competitively have determined that if they have lower tax rates, they may attract rich people and businesses. As a result, money flows to those countries. The Biden team wants a global minimum tax. Janet Yellen, among others, has pushed this. And it's kind of falling on deaf ears until the last couple of weeks, where you've got Germany and France and now Great Britain are kind of embracing the idea as well of some level of global minimum tax. They also are more and more eyeing cryptocurrency with suspicion. This is why I don't know necessarily that cryptocurrency is going to last. You know, they're claiming, for example, that the generation of the computer algorithms, running the computer algorithms to mine Bitcoin is causing global warming. They actually make that claim that the energy used to mine for Bitcoin outpaces some countries like Sweden. Now, you should know that there are companies that use clean energy, renewable energy sources to mine Bitcoin, but they don't care about that. They want the talking point that Bitcoin is environmentally bad. So now you've got some companies. So let me just take a segue here for just a moment. Bitcoin is mined, using air quotes around that, by running computer algorithms. And graphic processor units, or GPUs, are typically used because graphics are so intensive these days on computers. The graphics are generated by mathematical algorithms, and those same computer cards that generate the graphics can run the Bitcoin algorithms. So several companies, I think NVIDIA is one. NVIDIA is one of the top graphics card producers in the world, have decided that they're going to put in some mechanism by which Bitcoin miners will not be able to use their cards because of global warming. And governments around the world are starting to be concerned about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency. So now the G8 and the G7 are concerned about cryptocurrency, in large part because they see it as a way to get around national currencies. But also, they don't like the fact that criminals are using Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin may not be as untraceable as some claim. You know, one of the allures of Bitcoin is supposedly that it's untraceable. You've got these wallets. They're digital apps in which you store your algorithmic code, and only you know the password. And if you lose your password, you lose your wallet and all of your Bitcoin. There's no way to get it back. And it's supposedly not traceable. But the American government was somehow able to recover some of the millions of dollars in Bitcoin Colonial Pipeline paid to the East European hackers. Now, there are some people out there who don't believe the story. There are some people out there who say this just absolutely cannot be true because Bitcoin isn't traceable. But the U.S. government and the company both say it's so. Now, you pay no attention to the U.S. government because the U.S. government will say whatever it wants to say. But when the company confirms it, as it now has, that gives it more plausibility. The reason being is because ask anyone who's involved in a Fortune 500 company, and they will tell you that these companies are more scared of the Securities and Exchange Commission than they are the Department of Justice. The SEC has their own enforcement mechanism. And if they're making public statements about their money that are not true, who cares that the SEC is part of the government? They're going to come after the company. And the company is saying somehow or another the U.S. government was able to recover some of the Bitcoin. So clearly it's more traceable than people have let on. But then the governments of the world still don't like it. And now Joe Biden is going to Europe, has gone to Europe, and is trying to get these European countries to embrace the idea of a global minimum tax, because the Biden administration does not like that there are some countries on the planet in the Western Hemisphere that have gotten rid of income tax or reduced income tax so much that they become a safe haven for companies. Janet Yellen is opposed to it. She's now the Treasury Secretary. She used to be the head of the Federal Reserve. This is problematic for a number of reasons. One, because essentially they're going to use the largest economies in the Western world to browbeat and pressure other countries that have found low taxation makes them economically competitive to the Western global powers. They're essentially going to bully other countries and force those countries through sanction or otherwise to drive up their taxes. They do not like the Western governments of the top economic countries, the G7. They do not like the fact that there are some countries that use low taxation as an economic benefit. For example, the Baltic nations, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they broke away from the Soviet Union. They never wanted to be a part of the Soviet Union. Those countries, particularly Latvia and Estonia, are highly, highly economically competitive. They keep taxes very, very low. They use, what was the thing? What do you call it? Gosh, suddenly it was in my head and now it's gone. Essentially, they tie spending and taxes to economic and population growth. And the rest of Europe, except for Eastern Europe. You know, it's very interesting. Eastern European countries tend to be the most pro-market, pro-capitalist countries in Europe. Why? Because they still remember what it was like in the Soviet Union, and they're opposed to going back to that. So they're very free market. They're very capitalists. The Baltic republics in particular are the most, in large part because they were the ones under the thumb of the Soviets for the longest, and they resented it. And so they're very pro-market, pro-capital, pro-free market. They've kept their taxes very low, and here come the European countries to bully them, along with the United States, led by the United States, to raise their taxes. Now, that's not all. They've got to figure out what to do with Russia. Joe Biden having a meeting with Russia, it is profoundly disturbing that the media has any sort of confidence in Joe Biden dealing with Vladimir Putin. Robert O'Brien, who was Donald Trump's national security advisor, gave a speech over the weekend while Biden was in Europe gearing up for this meeting with Putin and the NATO summit that came after the G7 summit. Here's what Robert O'Brien has to say.
And this is only a partial list. This doesn't even cover the great judges, the lower taxes and regulations, the energy independence, the vaccines, which I understand the new administration's taking credit for. It's incredible what the Trump administration did by putting you, the American people, first. But the Boston, New York, D.C., San Francisco elites, they said it could be done because they believed that America was in decline, and they thought there was nothing we can do about it. We all showed them, you all showed them that wasn't true, and that America's best days are still ahead. So when people ask me what worries me about the future, what worries me is that those elites, especially the self-appointed experts in the media, they're projecting American weakness to our adversaries, and that weakness is provocative. And so for our own safety, we have to return to the principles of Ronald Reagan, of the Trump administration, and that's peace through strength.
Peace through strength. Something that the Biden administration doesn't seem to understand. The Biden administration has gone back to this. It's not even the Obama era. It's the Carter era of essentially we're one of 190 some odd countries. We're not really better than the rest of them. We don't really have any moral claims to freedom. After all, we elected Donald Trump. How can we say that? That's their position. And they're giving up American clout around the world, unfortunately. The European countries like this. I played that audio at the beginning of the show. The European countries love the fact that the administration is apologizing for what they consider the excesses of Donald Trump, and they are apologizing for everything that has happened in the past that Europe doesn't like. They are trying to coddle Vladimir Putin. There's no way to coddle Vladimir Putin. And now, I got to say, this is one thing, and I've got a bone to pick with the Trump administration on this one as well. Although, to the Trump administration's credit, they were much more aggressive. Despite President Trump's public statements about Russia, you will recall the Trump administration was far more aggressive in going after Russian assets and shutting down Russian operations in this country than the Obama administration had been. The Obama administration denied that Russia was a problem. The 80s call, they want their foreign policy back, Mitt Romney. Remember that? The Trump administration, although President Trump himself said very nice things about Vladimir Putin repeatedly, his actions spoke louder than his words, and that he was very aggressive. But I still don't know that they were aggressive enough. The Biden administration is not nearly as aggressive as the Trump administration. And again, this is where the great disconnect comes in. The American media paid a great deal of attention to President Trump's words about Russia and never wanted to acknowledge his actions about Russia. They wanted to feed the sentiment that Donald Trump was some sort of Russian plant. They profited off the idea that Trump was a Russian plant. But the Trump administration arguably was tougher on, actually, it's not arguable. It's actually a fact. The Trump administration was tougher on Russia than the Obama administration. They imposed more sanctions on more individuals within the Russian regime. They shut down Russian spy operations in the United States. They pushed back against Russian alliance building in the Middle East. They pushed back against Russian expansionist tendencies in Ukraine. They did all those things. And now the Biden administration comes in and talks tough about Russia, but they're the ones who have allowed the Russians to undercut Ukraine with the pipeline. They're the ones who have allowed Russia to undercut Western Europe with the pipeline into Germany. The Biden administration wants no pipelines in this country, but is perfectly happy to let Vladimir Putin build a bunch of pipelines in Europe. And the media, of course, they like the tough words, but they don't like the tough actions. The Biden administration isn't taking tough actions. The Trump administration did, but the media prefers that the Biden administration sounds tough while not being tough. And the rest of the Western world gets this as well, and so does President Xi of China, who's paying attention. It's really unfortunate that the media pays more attention to what people say than what people do, because what they do is really what's important, and that's what counts.
News and in-depth analysis.